Hello friends, welcome to another episode of the Pirate Round. I be Cap'n and Scarlet here, and this be the Scarlet Raven. And we're going to pour out here a drink to our friends, and from the cursed crystal skull that contains Jamaican mountain red, brewed by the rats of Jamaica, Pie being one of them. And we want to say to you friends, and of course Bill G, and we want to say to you friends, welcome to this episode. All of you who we haven't seen in a while, who we hope to see soon, who we haven't yet met, and those who have left us, we offer our condolences and our fair regards, and we say to you now, welcome to the Pirate Round, your hard.
Your hard.
Now, Scarlet Raven, you know, when we're out sailing for long distances and we need something to do, quite often we'll be found reading books, won't we?
That's right. We read a lot of books here in the Pirate Round.
You wouldn't think that pirates would read that much, but you know, there's often times when you're careening the ship and you're not doing much of the work because you're horsewhipping the crew to do it, and you've got time on your hands, and so if you aren't out drinking yourself senseless or hunting for food, well then you're reading books.
Well, you know, Steve Bonnet was quite book-read.
He was.
He had a ship full of books.
Yeah, the gentleman pirate. He had his giant great cabin there was full of books. He loved to read, of course, and loved stories and such. So there you go.
Military history and even the fanciful tales of piracy that were going on in the time.
Ah, true. So now, folks, I want to recommend a book to everyone here.
You know what, Captain? I'm kind of hungry. Maybe we should be scanning the horizon for some food.
For food, you say?
Yeah, maybe a ship to take that's got some food.
Oh, maybe so. If you're that hungry.
Well, you know, they say the horizon can be hungry.
Ah, true. So we're going to talk about this book. It's called The Hungry Horizon.
Oh,
look what you did. The Hungry Horizon, Pirates of the Pacific, Book 1, and it's by Mike Hawthorn. A very, very good book. I've read it twice now.
I've read it once.
At first, I've got to say that when first time I read it, I didn't really realize what I was reading. I thought it was just going to be another pirate adventure, sort of, you know, a few swashbuckling things here and there, you know, some ship-to-ship action kind of along the Pirate Devlin type book.
Which we've not talked about.
We haven't talked about those yet, but I'll tell you what, this book was different. Very, very different. And for one thing, it does not take place during the golden age of piracy. It actually takes place around 1679 and 1680, towards the time period of the buccaneers and the privateers operating against Spain in the Caribbean. And this book, very well researched by Mike Hawthorn, who is an artist who's done quite a bit of work. His work's very interesting. If you have a chance to take a look at it online, you'll see that he paints interesting situations with bright colors and interesting scenes and such. And he's got quite a portfolio of works that go back quite a few years. And apparently he's also tried his very creative hand here at writing. And with this well-researched book, we come across called The Hungry Horizon. Now, it concerns four people, and essentially, in the time of the years turning from 1679 to 1680, around the time Port Royal, Jamaica. And you have Tom Shepherd, who is the oldest in the group. He's in his 30s, and that's already considered quite old.
Right, and he's pretty much the main character.
Yeah, he's pretty much the main character, although it does go back and forth between the other 3 and 4. You have Tom Shepherd, you have Scarlet, who's a gypsy, who's from that area there in Port Royal, and you have Joseph, who's an Irishman, and then you have Malcolm, who's a Scotsman. And so you have a group of people from all over the world there who've ended up in the Caribbean, and they're trying to live their lives and pursuing different events and tasks in order to make a living somehow, and basically just living hand to mouth and day to day. Now, Tom Shepherd's history is unique. Now, he was part of the original privateering expedition that Henry Morgan undertook when he first attacked Portobello and then attacked across the Panamanian Peninsula, Isthmus of Panama there, and attacked Panama City on the other side. And Tom Shepard's history, as it's slowly revealed in the book, is that as the pirates approached Panama City, all the wealth and goods of the city were loaded in a boat, a large ship called the Santissima Trinidad, I think it was called, and it was starting to sail away to the south out of the reach of the pirates. And a group of pirates had taken hold of a small island off the coast, and they were to look out for ships that were sailing by, specifically escape ships that might be loaded with treasure and loot heading south. And Tom Shepard was a lookout on top of a mountain, and he was to fire a musket round and into the air to alert those men who were down in the town on this island, and then to alert them that there was a ship escaping and that they should pursue it to get the treasure. So Tom, on top of a mountain, sitting underneath the cross, looks out and sees a ship going away, and fires his musket again and again and again, and nothing happens. It's because all his friends are down in the town in drunken debauchery, and they let that ship get away with millions and millions in gold and silver and precious goods and hostages. And because of that, very little treasure was actually recovered by Henry Morgan from Panama City. Certainly not enough to make the whole enterprise worth it.
It's you know, this book is quite raw. He hits upon things in this book that I've never seen anybody else do. He hits upon the mate lot.
True.
And
the relationships that people had there aboard ships with each other and such, and the male relationships in a way. What happens in 1679, and the main crux of the story, of course, is with Tom Shepard and his group, Malcolm, Scarlet, and Joseph, is they are partying it up in Port Royal after bringing in some turtle shells and turtle meat, and after working for a while as turtle fishermen. And one of their crew gets involved in a fracas in a cockfight, and because of that, some people end up getting killed, and they end up being chased by the law. And
to escape from being arrested and hung.
Right. So to escape being arrested, they flee to a group where some privateers are assembling for another voyage and another privateering expedition.
John Coxen
and Bartholomew Sharpe
right.
are assembling another privateering expedition to go against Portobello and Panama. Now Tom is quite a bit put out by this. Now he's loyal to his friends, and so he helps them escape. However, earlier he's been given an offer to become a captain in the Prussian Navy, and he sees this as a way to get out of the Caribbean and to become legitimate
and to make a good wage,
and to make good wage, and to become a gentleman then. And in addition, he's given a very special rifled musket that he carries with him that turns out to be very, very useful in hunting and sniping later on.
Right. It's quite accurate.
So his friends then go to the bay, and they meet up with the other privateers and the other buccaneers who are there. And they're a motley bunch, of course, but they're busy celebrating Christmas and New Year's, and so they're not in any hurry to leave. But one thing they need is fresh meat, and so Tom and his friends go up into the hills and go hunting. And then, of course, they have these adventures with runaway slaves and plantations, people living on the plantation, and with
people who are sick.
And
they heal them back.
And that's true. And they run across various wild escaped slaves who are living in the hills of Jamaica, called macaroons, I think. Now, I think these escaped slaves were called macaroons or something of the sort. And they pose quite a bit of nuisance there, helping other escaped slaves. And they run across them, but don't do anything to stop their predations, because they're essentially there to bring fresh meat in. and they don't want to cause any more trouble. They essentially just want to get on with their lives and get back to the bay so they can join the expedition. And something happens there during the debaucheries of the New Year's Eve celebrations. There's an informant and a witness who comes from Port Royal into the encampment, and they're there to point them out, Tom and his friends, and they're there to arrest them and take them back to Port Royal to hang. And this happens to be a young lad who is the doorman, I suppose, or the potboy at the inn that they were staying at. And because they can't afford to be identified by this youngster, they drown him in a water barrel. Which leads me to talk about the morality of the characters in the story. I essentially consider them amoral.
Very, very much.
Not anti-moral, meaning that they're essentially criminal psychopaths, but they're very much within the time of their own period where they'll kill in order to preserve their own lives.
And freedoms, yeah.
And their own freedom. And if it comes to the point where they'll have to do someone a bad turn to make sure that they don't get captured, well, they'll do it. And that was the first time when I started reading the book that I realized that Mike Hawthorn was going to treat his characters just a little bit differently than many people have treated their characters.
Right, as very much heroes. These guys are, while they're the main focus, they're not really truly heroes.
They're more anti-heroes, I suppose you could say, in that sense.
Right, now not that they always do bad things.
No, and that's the thing, it's very complex. They may not always do good things and they may not always do bad things, but they definitely do things to serve themselves, what would be in their own best interest. In that sense, they're sort of...
they're very human.
They're very human, but they're not bound by traditional senses of morality that other people might be, and which of course would make them pirates in a way. I mean, buccaneers, are privateers in that sense, that they're willing to do certain things to get money. So they do then join up in a group and they head to Portobello. And Portobello is a fortified city on the coast of the Panamanian Isthmus. And the city's been attacked, again and again by people, and there's not much pickings there. They're able to find a few things, and at the time, Tom, because he's had quite a bit of experience in the area, sort of employed as a translator from English to Spanish. And of course, his rifle comes in handy when he spends it and climbs up into the top of a church tower and snipes down on the Spanish people inside a fort and allows his men to run free through the city and pillage the city, so to speak, while he's up there sniping and keeping the soldiers down and keeping the soldiers from taking pot shots at the English. Now, you begin to get an idea of Tom's morality, that he does not like shooting down these men. He calls them defenseless, even though they're not really defenseless. They're Spanish soldiers. But he doesn't like the idea that you're sniping them. That he would rather face them full on in a battle and an attack than he would be sniping them out. And so there is this twinge that he has, a sort of this sense of morality that doesn't like to do this, but he will do it if he's ordered to by his commanders, and they do. John Coxen and Bartholomew Sharpe then order him to do this, and he does. Now, at the time he and his friends are rampaging through Portobello, they come across a mansion, and Scarlet, their little gypsy friend, who is quite fleet and quite handy with his hands and feet, climbs up over the walls of the fortified mansion and lets them in. Now, inside the mansion, there's a slave maid who is there taking care of a very sick young man who is too sick to be moved or evacuated from the city. And unfortunately, the slave maid is killed accidentally when she falls down the stairs. But the man himself then is put out of his misery by Tom, who smothers him essentially, and then pulls his body from the sick room, only to find that the body was hiding a box of jewels. Now, in typical tradition of many of these people, many of these pirates and buccaneers, he does not tell his friends that he's got these jewels. He hides them.
Which is a crime in itself against all the pirate crew. Because
it is.
You are supposed to to relinquish all this so it can be divided up
Equally.
Yeah, well, the
equal
commanders,
shares.
those leading it, would get a greater share.
Yeah.
So Coxen, who I believe is the head of it, would get the biggest share, and then Sharpe, and then all the other lieutenants underneath them, and then Tom on down. So he would have gotten basically nothing.
He would have gotten very little. And later on, he finds that Coxen himself is stealing, concealing gold coins that he has found, and cheating everyone else under his command so that he would remain wealthy. So at the time then, what Tom does is he seeks to conceal those jewels, and he has an idea. He takes an old butcher's apron and cuts it up and makes a very rude and crude sort of waistcoat out of leather, and then sews the jewels into the collar of the waistcoat. Now, I was so taken by this idea of making something like that I decided to make my own leather waistcoat. And I sewed it together, hand sewed it together, out of leather, thick. It's not necessarily garment leather, it's more like armor leather. I sewed it together. Inside the collar, of course, there's no jewels. They don't happen to have any jewels. But I decided to try to make
Maybe
it...
not be keeping jewels away from it.
Yeah, probably not. I decided to make it sort of the idea of the design that that they would have from those days, which would be buttons down the front and little bits of sort of trim here on the front with little tabs. And I felt really inspired to do this. Now, also, friends, you might know of the TV series Black Sails. And in the first season, there is Quartermaster Gates, who I like as a character very much. Unfortunately, he's killed in the final episode of season 1.
Spoiler.
Yes, he's killed by Captain Flint. And he wears a very impressive leather waistcoat. And I thought, well, that's nice. Look what he's got. For sure I'm going to make one now, because, I like that character of Gates, and I felt inspired by the character of Tom Shepard in this book to make something of the sort, and I decided to make one for myself. So then, eventually...
To carry on about the story.
Which I like to, and I'd like to digress a bit. They decide to flee Portobello with whatever they can have. And not all of it makes it to the share out on the islands. They have problems with ships and with sharks and with tippy canoes, and they lose quite a bit of expensive tapestries and rugs and the sort. But some of it does make it to the share out, and then they decide what they're going to do is, because they didn't quite get as much money as they wanted from Portobello, they decide to go across the isthmus and attack Panama City. Now, Tom is not for this, because he's already been there, and he knows how dangerous it can be with the wild Indians in the jungle, and the snakes, and the hunger, and everything else, and then trying to attack a fortified city like Panama City with the crew that they have, which isn't much. He's quite concerned that this isn't going to work out correctly, but he goes along anyway, because he and his friends haven't made much money.
No. And of course, he still wants to go become a Prussian captain.
He does, and he still thinks that, well, I still have my chance. I can still go back, and I'll do that. And what will happen is I'll go and I'll have money, and I'll still be able to rendezvous with this Dutch ship, and I'll be able to sail for Europe and put all this behind me. So, what happens is they start to cross the Isthmus of Panama, and this area is what they call the Empire of Darien. And it's a place that it's given this area, the inner area of the Isthmus of Panama. And the Indians there are called the Indians of Darien, and this whole place is mountainous and rugged and teeming with natives who are hostile to the Spanish, but also hostile to any outsiders, and it's teeming with escaped slaves and everything. And so it's a very difficult crossing, fraught with much danger, until they come across some Indian allies who take care of them and are able to feed them a bit. And
they also hate the Spanish, but they figure that the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's true. I guess you could look at it that way, and of course they see it as a way to gain some of these Indians as a way to gain plunder too, payment or knives or weapons and stuff, so they can continue fighting the Spanish. And they make their way across, and they eventually get to an Indian camp on the other side of the Continental Divide. And there they have a big party where they rendezvous with a tribe that's going to help them attack what they consider to be gold mines or the gold depot at Santa Maria. Now at this time, you must understand about this story is it's very raw, it's very adult, and it's very in your face about sexuality.
There is a commander in there who has young boys.
Yes,
that he uses.
It's very disturbing images, of course. Probably the most uncomfortable part of reading the book are passages of that. But I think Mike Hawthorn is trying to present you with an actual correct and true in-your-face version of what life was like on an expedition such as that, and the people who actually were part of an expedition. They weren't choir boys, that's for sure. I mean, they weren't, the paragons of virtue. These were criminals in many ways, very violent, very debauched, and he pulls out all the stops.
Now, there's a really good interview with Mike Hawthorn on Under the Crossbones, which we listened to, which is really quite good.
Yep, and he talks a bit about the people in the book and different things that happen, and his motivations for writing the book, and it comes across as being a very well educated and a very well researched story. And Mike's got his own way of telling his adventures here in the book, and I appreciate it a great deal that we had a chance to listen to that before we were able to do this. So what happens then is that they gather with this Indian tribe, and they're going to go down the river and attack this place called Santa Maria. And that's supposed to be the gold depot. Now, before they leave, they have a huge celebration in the Indian village. And one of the men, Joseph, has sexual relations with an albino Indian woman. And her idea, of course, is to become pregnant with his child because she considers him, because of his pale skin, to be sort of almost like a god. He's very powerful physically, and he carries weapons. And their whole relation that they have, the sexual relation they have, it's very well written. It's almost dreamlike. It's almost hypnotic in a way. And I thought that episode was very well done, very well written. And I've got to commend Mike for putting that there and writing about it in a way that makes it very interesting, that may seem like more of an uncomfortable sort of episode to be very, very engaging. And so as the Buccaneer crew heads across down towards Santa Maria, they attack, and of course that's when you get to the part of the story full of plunder and pillaging and terrorism and horrible violence. Right. Now you get to the part where it does not hold back at all. And it was a very difficult part to read, but you've got to understand. And people who, every time you drink a bottle of Captain Morgan's rum, I want you to think a little bit about Captain Morgan. And when he first, in 1670, when he first attacked Panama City, and he ordered his men to nail Spaniards' hands to tables in order to torture them so that they would tell these Englishmen where they had kept their gold. And they had another particular way of torturing people, and that was called wounding, where they would take a knotted rope and put it around someone's head and crank it with a stick until their eyeballs burst from their face. These were all tactics employed by both sides against each other to torture each other in the most cruelest of manner to find out where you hid your treasure. And he does not hold back at all in this story about that. He tells it all down to the nitty-gritty. And it's a very difficult part of the book to read, but if you keep going in it, you begin to realize that he's not making moral judgments. He's simply telling you what would have happened or what might have happened. And it's up to you then to decide the good or the bad or the evil or not of these actions. Now, unfortunately, when the Buccaneers reach Santa Maria, all the silver and gold has been taken because they've been forewarned by the Indians, and the Spaniards have loaded everything into canoes and taken off down the river. And so with almost nothing there to show for all their efforts, except maybe a clean change of clothes, the buccaneers then go in pursuit of these canoes full of silver and gold down the river towards Panama City. And the idea then is that they're going to attack Panama City. And they then come near the coast, and they can't quite catch those canoes, and they're having a very, very difficult time finding food and resources. And then that is where this book pretty much ends.
Now you have to remember that John Coxen and Bartholomew Sharpe did do this, crossing the isthmus.
Yes, yeah.
So this is, while this is fiction, it's historical fiction. It's based upon events that actually happened.
Yes, and there are characters in this story that are correct, like Basil Ringrose, who was a navigator and a cartographer,
right.
And William Dampier, who was also with the story. So there are people in the story then who are actual characters, and so you follow the history of this. And there's so many layers of history, folks. There's the high school history book layer, and then there's the I got to dig a little deeper, and you find out that maybe these people weren't exactly the paragons of virtue that you found. And then there's the next layer when you find out that they raped and pillaged and killed and murdered to get their riches. And then there's the next layer that you find that the people who they were with were even worse, and that the people they fought against did terrible things back to them. And
you got the bottom layer, which is the true facts that we don't even know about.
Which we still don't know exactly all the true facts. So, Hungry Horizon, it's the first book in a proposed trilogy, Pirates of the Pacific trilogy. Now, I've got to recommend it to any hardcore reader of pirate books. It's not about the golden age or history, maritime history, or history of that time. It's not about the golden age of pirates, which is like 1700 to 1720. This takes place in 1680. This is the age of the buccaneer. This is the age of the privateer.
Right before.
And this is a very interesting time period because people were still exploring the world. They still thought that if you sailed too far south in the ocean, you would sail off the edge of the earth. Or you would encounter sea monsters so big that they would crush your ship with just a casual blow. Or you would encounter giants who would run around in circles and throw rocks at your ship and sink you from afar. And so there's still quite a bit of the mystery of the world that hasn't quite been explored yet. And so that comes out in all the legends and the lore of this book as it gets through the story. Now I want to say a personal thank you to Mike Hawthorn. My wife, the Scarlet Raven, contacted him and asked if we could somehow get hold of a copy of Book 2, which is called The Unholy Trinity.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, we know at this time, we don't know whether Mike has been able to find a publisher for the book.
We know he's looking for one. So if you know a publisher,
yeah, exactly.
This was published by
Fireship Press.
Fireship Press, and Mike is not. He will admit it. He's not much of. He doesn't push a lot, and
he didn't promote the book.
He didn't promote the book as well as they liked. And Fireship Press is not a big name, and they want somebody to go out there and just push, and Mike didn't do that. So he's not under Fireship Press, and he's trying to find a publisher. So actually, when I was reaching out to him, suggested that he might reach out to Bennerson Little, who is another fine author.
An actually fine author.
Who I believe is starting his own publishing company.
Which would be great.
Which would be great. We have, it's a very rough copy of The Unholy Trinity.
Yeah.
But the captain here is reading it. I haven't had a chance yet. I've been reading other stuff and trying to finish up on other things. He gave it to us in a format that we could put on our tablets or read on our computer.
PDF form.
With editing notes. But, it carries on from this book. And we really want to thank Mike for allowing us to do that. He was quite gracious enough. And even though we were pirates, he felt that we weren't really pirates and wouldn't steal. Which we would never, we would never do that. We want to promote Mike because he's wrote a very good book and it's very raw. Oops, Pi
likes the book too.
Pi likes the book too. It's almost like, wow, I can't believe he's writing writing that or saying that. But it is a good book.
Yeah, it is.
I read it. I enjoyed it. I probably didn't like it as much as the captain here, but it is a good book, and I would recommend it. Especially, like I said, if you like history and you like, there's no ship battles going on in this that I remember.
Not too much. Most of it takes place on land.
Yes.
And as they're attacking the city or crossing over the Isthmus of Panama. It's a book of high adventure. There's a great deal of adventure. It's a book of intrigue, friendship, loyalties, and also a book of history and geography and many things like that. I want to say thank you, Mike, for being courageous enough to write this story. Now, there's a lot of things that authors write about, and you know they're pulling their punches. They're not putting the stuff in the books that they should. To make it seem,
sugarcoating.
Yeah, they're sugarcoating the stories quite a bit to maintain the myth and the legend of one thing or another. And that's something that he absolutely does not do. He strips away it all, lays it bare, and comes out with a book that's a fine adventure story that is truly for adults only, and a book that I can recommend as being very engaging, very provocative, challenging to read, yes, but also very enjoyable. So out of 5 cannon blasts, what would you give this book?
It's a little harsh for me. I would give it 3.5, but I did enjoy it. It's not my favorite, but I would recommend reading this book. It's not horribly long, almost 300 pages.
It goes very quickly.
It does. 283 pages.
It's very well written, very smoothly written, very well written. It has a great plot flow that you follow very quickly. There's no stilted areas. There's no areas where you feel like you just feel like throwing it away because they don't seem like the characters are doing anything. Everything is flowing quite smoothly. I don't think I've ever read a 5 Cannon Blast book.
No.
It must be out there somewhere, but I don't think I've ever read one.
Probably the closest one in my likes would have been The Only Life That Mattered, which isn't 5, but it's up there.
Yeah, I would give this book a solid 4 Cannon Blasts. And I say that because most pirate books I read don't really measure up to 4 Cannon Blasts.
It's not as raw.
Yeah, but this one
is pretty raw.
Yeah, but this one does, and it's very. I would recommend it. I'm just starting the Unholy Trinity, and I haven't got quite as far in it as I would like. There's many things happening in the world now that I'm sure people know about that is sort of distracting us. But I'm getting through it, and from what I'm reading, it carries on the story essentially from where this book stops and begins again. And it's the same characters, and as they find their way through more adventures, that's where it goes. So,
and it's a much shorter story so far. It's almost 200 pages.
Yeah, it's a little shorter than this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, folks, The Hungry Horizon from Fireship Press by Mike Hawthorn. Right. And now, I will say one thing about Fireship Press. They do have other naval history books that are quite good. I ordered a few other books from them, and I enjoyed reading some of the other stuff about naval history. So you might want to look them up.
Yeah, this was a gift that I gave to the captain.
Yeah, it's quite a good book.
Yeah, 2018.
2018 there. So, folks, Mike Hawthorn, The Hungry Horizon, recommended, but take it with a dose of salt because it is a very adult and very raw, but also I think a very satisfying read. And people have asked us before if we could recommend books or movies or sort that we like, and so we'll take this one episode then and recommend this book for those who want an adult-oriented pirate, privateer or buccaneer adventure, not necessarily a pirate adventure.
I definitely wouldn't call it a pirate because it's not pirate. It's more buccaneer or
yeah, it's more of that different time period. So, well, with that, folks, I would say farewell to you now, and we'll give us our toast here. Like, share, and subscribe on our Facebook channel and our YouTube channel, and make sure you stab that subscribe button with a cutlash. And we say to you folks, always be true to yourself, always be a pirate, find some strength in these troubled times, Stick with your family,
Keep your
stick with
smarts.
your friends. Don't give in to panic. Stick with your smarts, folks.
Keep the yard arm distance.
Yeah.
Not the yard arm, the fathom. The fathom distance.
Keep a fathom distance away from
That's
folks.
6 feet.
Yeah, that's 6 feet that you didn't know. And keep a fathom's distance away. And we say to you, friends, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Pirate Round. I be the Cap'n and Scarlet here. This be the Scarlet Raven. And Yarhar, smooth sailing.
Smooth sailing. Yard arm.